Let me talk to you about Enzo, a French coming of age drama that I watched at the festival. I also watched this one pretty early on. It's a French film, but it is heavily in French and Ukrainian language. So the plot is that you have a teenager, Enzo, who has very wealthy parents, very wealthy family. His whole home life looks like something from the Netflix series Elite. And he rejects the expectations of his wealthy parents and family and instead takes an apprenticeship at a building site where he develops a crush on Vlad, who is a Ukrainian bricklayer who is struggling with whether or not to return home and fight in the war happening in Ukraine. So over the course of the film, you kind of see him constantly at odds with his family. You see his crush developing. You see him trying to kind of like feel attachment to someone through this bricklayer guy and honestly the other men that he works with in the on the site. And ultimately you see him trying to get the bricklayer, whose name is Vlad, to open up about how he feels about being away from home and what's going on with the war and him not being there fighting. He increasingly does more and more stunts to get attention, whether it's from Vlad, whether it's from his parents, whether it's just him processing his own teenage angst and borderline suicidal thoughts. And it keeps on escalating in terms of physical harm to himself. Ultimately, by the end, he very seriously injures himself. And he whips out a gun during his brother's like graduation party. Like he's just a mess. The parents are tired of his matter. Um, he wakes up in hospital. He seems to get a bit more of a grip on himself when he realizes he's gone a bit far. He goes on vacation with his parents and he finds out that Vlad, and after he basically confesses to Vlad that he has a thing for him, and Vlad, who is clearly deeply closeted, basically tries to tell him, go back into your own bubble, go back into your magical rich people French life. I'm just a poor bricklayer, and he's clearly deeply closeted. And he also alludes to his father being violent, so you can get certain assumptions about what his life must have been if you're to interpret him as a gay or queer man himself. You can also see his guilt about being away from the war is building on him. By the end of the story, his parents find out that yeah, there is a guy that he liked in the workplace. They don't in any way react to his sexuality, but they do warn him that basically you're being preyed upon because that was a much older man and you're a boy. Um, and they increasingly try to protect him. By the end of the film, we find out Vlad has gone back to Ukraine. He calls Enzo, they have a brief phone call at the end. You can hear the sounds of the guns and the bombs going off. He admits that he's scared. He asks Enzo if he was in love with him. Enzo says like he thinks so. And it kind of ends there. Very similar. I don't know if you noticed some similarities between what I just described to you and a certain film. This film is basically French Ukrainian Call Me by Your Name. So at several points I was like, is this a remake? I genuinely was wondering, is this a French and Ukrainian language remake of the film? Because it was following the beat by beat plot points of Call Me by Your Name. Yes, the ending scene almost feels identical to the scene at the end of Call Me by Your Name, where Elio gets that call from what's his name again? Arnie Hammer's character, where he gets the call from Oliver, and Oliver is saying he's gone back to America, and he says that his dad, his Elio's parents are cooler about his sexuality than his dad ever was, and they acknowledge that they had whatever they had, but like it's sad, and Elio is sad, and for Enzo is also sad, like extremely similar. But it doesn't hold a candle to Call Me by Your Name, which is a film that, whilst I understand has a lot of problematic elements, I still consider it to be a modern masterpiece. Um, because it doesn't look visually stunning the way Call Me by Your Name does. It doesn't have a lead performance as compelling as Timothy Chalamet's, in my opinion, and it just doesn't. The locations don't look as parts of the character of the film as Call Me by Your Name does. There are some interesting and good elements in the film, like the way they kind of subvert your expectations with how his parents are. Like his parents are actually very good parents, very loving parents. Like his mom is a great mother, and he's just Enzo is just kind of an asshole, just an annoying teenager. And his parents are kind of just like lovely people. But at the same time, as someone who is a bit of a Nepo baby myself, who in many ways has continuously rejected the quote unquote gifts that my family would bestow upon me because I know the emotional blackmail that comes with it. I did actually relate to the character in many ways, but I like to think I'm not as annoying and insufferable as Enzo. Maybe
Mm.
I am. The film doesn't go that deep into the problematic age gap. It acknowledges it more than Call Me by Your Name
I
did,
was
to
about
be
to say
honest.
that's still a step up from Call Me
Oh
by Your
no,
Name.
it definitely does a better job
Yeah.
than Call Me by Your Name. And again, remember this is a French film. So um but it doesn't go there. But that's because the quote unquote romance of the story never really goes that much. It's just like presented very much as an unrequited childhood crush until towards the end. I will say the actor playing Vlad is gorgeous. I'm pretty sure they just cast a model off of the street, a Ukrainian model off of the street. His acting was not the best, but he was beautiful. The way the film weaves in grief about Ukrainian diasporans and their
Mm.
guilt about not being back at home, whilst obviously being terrified to go back home, I actually thought it did it quite well.
Mm.
I actually wish it had leaned into it a bit more. Overall, the film to me is just mid. Mid leaning on slightly bad because I thought the central performance wasn't great. And because it was way too similar to Call Me by Your Name. But I
Mm.
don't regret watching it. It kind of expanded my knowledge of like European film a bit, so I'm not mad at it.
I'm guessing it doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
Now, that is a great question. I have been thinking and thinking, does this film pass the Bechdel test? I think the answer is no. I think the only person. Oh, I forgot to even add, speaking of women characters, there's literally a female character in this movie that is almost identical to Martha, whatever her name was from Call Me By Your Name, who was the little female girlfriend
Mm.
that
Yeah.
Elio had, that he brought her home one time and they went swimming and they hooked up while he was still processing his whole thing for Oliver. There's literally a brown haired girl from his school or for one of his classmates that he brings home in the middle of processing his crush on Vlad, and they hook up in the house. Like, it is, again, it feels like a shot for shot remake of Call Me By Your Name sometimes. And she is one of the female characters. The other female character is his mom. I don't believe they ever speak to each other or any women speak to each other. Maybe she actually briefly speaks to the girl, but any conversation they would have had would have been over the fact that her son was bringing this girl home. Maybe she might have said something like, "Oh, how are your parents?" In which case it would pass, but it doesn't clearly stand out
Yeah.
to me.
Okay.